we read the script, and then we will start with the attendance. National Pledge of Allegiance.
Not singing. I'm not singing.
No singing. Good morning. As chair of the Labor Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, and in accordance with House Rule 67 and the governor's emergency order number 12 pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. This is a public hearing on all bills referred to the committee and scheduled in the House calendar for today. Executive session may be held on any bill referred to the committee. This is an executive session. Please note that there is no physical location for members of the public to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I am confirming that all members of the committee and select legislative staff have the ability to communicate extemporaneously during this meeting through the Zoom electronic meeting platform, and the public has access to contemporaneously listen and, if necessary, participate in this meeting by Zoom platform or by telephone. All necessary access information has been made available in the House calendar and through the electronic calendar on the General Court website. The notice of this meeting complies with House Rule RSA 91A. Anyone who has a problem accessing the meeting should call 271-3600 or email hcs@leg.state.nh.us. In the event the public is unable to access the meeting will be adjourned and rescheduled. Please note that all votes that are taken during this meeting shall be done by roll call vote. Let's start the meeting by taking the roll call attendance. When each member states their presence, please also state whether there is anyone in the room with you during this meeting, which is required under the right to know law. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representative Avalani.
Present, at work, employees around.
Representative Baroudi.
Muted.
We did not hear you, Representative Brody. You're on mute.
I'm in my home office in Manchester, and someone will be coming in and out.
Representative Bouchard.
I'm home and alone in Manchester.
Representative Boyd.
At home in my office.
Anyone with you?
No one is with me.
Representative Cahill.
Home in Newmarket, alone in the room.
Representative Callum, present in the LOB. Representative Especia.
Yeah. I'm here in Nashua in my living room. And my fiance's upstairs.
Representative Huff, present at the LOB. Representative Adjutant, here in the LOB. Representative Mackey. Representative Nunez.
In my home office alone.
Representative Prout.
At home alone.
Representative Smith.
I'm present and alone in my home office.
Representative Seaworth.
I'm here in the LOB.
Representative Susie.
At home, alone.
Representative Sullivan.
At home in my home office, my wife is around and about.
Representative Toomey.
At home, alone. My wife is upstairs.
Representative Turcott,
Present in the LOB.
Representative Love,
Here in the LOB.
Representative Infantine,
Here in the LOB with all my comrades around. Okay, we are now going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Brian, would you please lead us?
Yes. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice, and all.
I recited before, we are here in the LOB. We have removed our jackets as it is very warm in here, no air conditioning, and we're doing our best. I went out, folks, and bought this really cool state of New Hampshire seal mask. And think it'd be better to look at than something else. And it took me a while because I had to find one that was made in the United States. So I found one, and now we don't need the mask anymore. So I guess that's good for all of us. But I at least had to show off my cool mask. Please remember when we are voting today, it's a courtesy to everyone if you would like to show your face. Obviously, when you're speaking, I would like that when you're speaking. To have your Zoom camera on. That is not required, but it's a courtesy. However, it is required that you have your face showing on and not just your picture when we are in a voting mode and you do cast your vote. Being said, I'm going to start the executive session on Senate Bill 123 relative to employer payments of required COVID-19 testing. And I recognize Representative Seaworth for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move this bill on to pass, and I have an amendment.
You're recognized to speak on your bill and your amendment.
All right, my amendment is number 1638H. I sent this around to the committee. Hopefully everyone got it and had a chance to glance at it. I have to credit our chairman for doing the thinking for most of this. I got my name on it, but he did a lot of the work. I know for myself, the public hearing, I think we were generally in favor of this bill, but there were a few concerns raised during the hearing. There were some others that came up afterwards. And so I wanted to take a closer look at this bill. Our chairman actually did, as we often like to do on this committee, he contacted the Department of Labor and asked them, how big is this problem? Is this a common issue? And their answer was not really. They cited about a dozen issues related to COVID-19, not necessarily the specific issue, anything from the vaccines to the testing to are you on the clock when you go off to get your test? So it's not clear to me that they have actually had issues exactly like what we're addressing in this bill. What they did say, though, is if someone does come to them and says, hey, my employer required me to go get a test, and when I came back, he said they're not paying for it, they would say, that's not right. The law requires that employers pay for any medical examination that they require. So with that information, the chairman called a meeting with the senator sponsors of this bill, and we had some discussions. And actually, he suggested, wouldn't this be simpler if we just replace all that added language with one word, test? And one of the senators said, I was just going to say the same thing. So that's what I have drafted. Instead of a new section which adds some specific language to deal with COVID-19 and actually duplicates a paragraph that's already in the law, we added, with this amendment, we would add one more word, test, to medical examination and records as the things that if an employer requires from an employee, they also have to pay for it. As I said, from the Department of Labor standpoint, this is how they would apply the existing law, so it's not really a change. But what we did hear from the senators is they believe there is some confusion out there and some disagreement on what the existing law means, and this would clarify it. It also is not specific to COVID-19 anymore. If there's a COVID-22, it would also apply. If there's any other medical issues, it makes clear, as the department already would enforce, that medical testing is part and parcel of a medical examination. So I ask you, please adopt this amendment.
Thank you, Brian. I was a little out of order. May I please have a second
Second. Oh,
second by Representative
I'm sorry.
Turcott. My apologies for not having that. It is now made, the motion is made and seconded. It is open for discussion. Representative Cahill, I see your hand. You're recognized to speak.
I was going to second, but Mr. Turcott beat me to it.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you, Representative Cahill. Are there any questions or excuse me, anyone else who would like to speak on behalf of the bill as ought to pass with amendment or against? Anyone here in the LOB? I don't see any. Anyone online who would like to speak for or against the motion on the floor with amendment?
Mr. Chair, don't we have to vote on the amendment first?
Representative Avalon has his hand up, by the way.
Yes, we do. It is, we don't vote on it before we have to have discussion, so I don't understand, Representative Sullivan. Yes, we do have to vote on the amendment. And then it could be open to any other additional amendments. And then we would vote on each individual amendment and then the final. But there's the motion on the floor is ought to pass with amendment, and then now it's open for discussion. Representative Avalon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question relating to the executive orders. If the government requires a negative test coming back from vacation or a possible exposure, and the employer has to require that, will the employer have to, again, pay for that test, even though it's not required through the employer policy?
It is the understanding of the chairman and the vice chairman in our communications with the Department of Labor that they do consider that to be the current law now. That is how, if questions are brought to them by an employer or an employee, that they would state that that's what they feel RSA 275:3 states, and all we are doing is trying to codify that and make it a little more specific. The answer to your direct answer to your question is yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank
is
you.
that, could I hear Representative Avaloni's question again, please?
Representative Avalani, would you please repeat your question one more time for Representative Turcott?
Yes, if an employer doesn't require a COVID test to return to work, if there is something that happened outside of their location, they went to a family wedding, they went on vacation, yet the executive orders require a negative test to return to work, or a negative test to not quarantine, or a negative test to anything like that, is the employer going to have to pay for that negative test, in order for them to return to work, even though it is outside the scope of the employer policy?
Thank you.
And while I'm not the Department of Labor, that is my understanding.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is that okay, Representative Turncock?
I guess it was. Thank you.
Very welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In answer to that, I think the representative has probably hit on a gray area that Department of Labor would have to address. I think you are, first of all, absolutely correct that this bill doesn't change. They would address that in a certain way. I'm not entirely sure what it was. This bill wouldn't change that, the way the law applies. But it is an interesting question. What if the employer doesn't require it, but some other entity does? At what point does it become, as the language says, a condition of employment? And I don't know if we have enough information to fully answer that.
Getting back to, we have a motion on the floor of ought to pass with an amendment. I'm happy to take other questions. Also, you're allowed now, this is the time period to speak in favor or against the bill. Representative.
I was gonna say, what other entity would require that?
And
I would
I think his example was, so there's a state requirement that if you've traveled out of state, you must take the test before you return to work. And that's not me as the employer requiring that, but but state law says that I have to. So am I requiring it or not? And that, I don't know how to answer that question.
I almost guess I would lean on that not being a gray area, because if the employer requires it, then the employer is paying for it. It's the same thing as a drug test. Like, if there was some weird circumstance where the state of New Hampshire wanted you to pass a drug test and come back, then this, that's not on the employer, that's on the state. I don't think it's terribly gray.
No, I agree. I would think if the state requires the employer to do it, the employer would then have to. Just a moment, I have a Representative Especia and then Representative Turcott.
Well, I was gonna say we have, thank you, Mr. Chair. We have Rudy Ogden if you wanted to Department of Labor on. So if you wanted to, he is here if you wanted to ask him.
Oh, is he on the line?
Rudy Ogden's on and he's got his hand up, so he might be willing to address.
Sorry, Rudy, I didn't. I have two screens here. I have to go back and forth here and look, so my apologies. Assistant Commissioner Ogden, you're recognized to speak on that matter. Thank you, Representative Especia and Representative Turcott, for pointing that out. I don't see Rudy. Space.
There he is. And he's off.
Hi, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. Happy to answer any questions in terms of the specific question that's come up relative and to if there was an order. The department's position on that would be whether the order is generated ultimately from the state or put in place by the employer. If the employee would need that in order to work, or if the employer was in some way facilitating that by saying, okay, in order to come back to work, you're going to need that. The department would view that as employer driven, and it would be a condition of employment, at which point in time, again, we would say that LAB 80302 would require, that's an existing regulation, would require the employer to bear the costs associated with that. As Representative Seaworth said earlier, the department views, again, through 275.3 and LAB 80302 that this type of testing already should be covered and paid for by the employer. Certainly, this could be looked at as a clarification of that, however.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Representative Ogden? Okay, getting back to the motion is ought to pass with amendment. Would anyone like to speak in favor or against the motion on the floor? Anyone here in the LOB wish to speak? Anyone online on Zoom wish to speak?
We have one.
Can I try to close out that meeting?
Yes, please.
I can't see it.
Yes, please
Thank
do.
you.
I don't see the hand. It's killing me.
It's Lena here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm here looking online. You guys are not nice to me this morning. Representative Turcott, you recognize to speak.
Yeah. As business owner, I would like to hear, if he would like to, I'm requesting Representative Avalani to speak on this issue as to the point he brought up. Is that, would that change or alter his position
on the current amendment? If he chooses to speak to it, if he doesn't, that's fine. But I would like to hear his opinion on it.
As long as we don't get too out of control
Yeah.
in debating each other, I will allow a simple question. Representative Avaloni, if you're willing to speak, you may, or you may choose not to.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, it has not changed my ability to vote in favor of this amendment. I just want a clarification on just the outside of the employer's realm, if this would still have to be paid by the employer.
Thank you, Representative.
Okay, I see no other questions or comments online or here in the LOB. So the motion on the floor is ought to pass with amendment 1638H. We're ready for the roll call vote. Clerk, you may call the roll.
Representative Seaworth,
Yes. Seaworth votes yes.
Representative Avaloni,
Yes.
Representative Callum, yes. Representative Mackey,
You're not here yet.
Representative Nunes,
Representative Nunes votes yes.
Representative Love,
Yes.
Representative Turcott,
Representative Turcott votes yes.
Representative Prout,
Prout votes yes.
Representative Huff,
Representative Huff votes yes.
Representative Sullivan,
Sullivan votes yes.
Representative Susie,
Representative Susie votes yes.
Representative Baroody,
Representative Rudy votes yes.
Representative Cahill,
Cahill votes yes.
Representative Especia,
Representative Especia votes yes.
Representative Schmidt,
Schmidt votes yes.
Representative Toomey,
Representative Toomey votes yes.
Representative Bouchard,
Representative Bouchard votes yes.
Representative Adjutant,
Adjutant votes yes.
Representative Infantine,
Representative Inventine votes yes.
Representative Boyd,
Boyd votes yes.
19 yes, the vote is affirmative.
Okay, the ought to pass with amendment is adopted and the bill is open to any additional amendment. Representative Huff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to offer
Chairman Infantine, we're actually not able to hear Representative Huff online. You want to get closer to a microphone, that would be helpful.
We will get the microphone closer to him.
Looks like he's muted.
He has to be muted on his computer or you're going to have feedback. Representative Huff, you could speak a little louder. You're
Yes,
recognized.
Can everybody hear me now?
Yes, sounds great.
Thank you. I would like to offer an amendment to this. I had
What is the amendment number, Representative Huff?
the amendment number, I'm not sure what it is at the moment because it's going to be coming in from Christina. The one that I had sent out to everybody that can follow along is.
John, Representative Huff, I need to interject just a little
Yeah.
bit here. First of all, Representative Mackey has joined us. Thank you very much, Representative Mackey. Sorry about the problems getting you the correct number. Christina, I would.
Yes.
We have an amendment and it is being processed. If it is not available to be submitted right now to each individual committee member by email, if it's not ready at this point, do we have an ETA?
I would anticipate, it is not ready right this minute, but I anticipate it's going to be ready quite soon.
Okay, I am reluctant to have you introduce or discuss an amendment that is wrong. And that is why we noticed the amendment was wrong about a half an hour, 45 minutes ago. And I'm reluctant to have you do that, to bring up something that is not even going to be discussed or accurate. I understand that the topic is, it's the wording. So
Can we recess this bill, work on the other one?
no, I don't want to do that.
I don't want to. All right.
I'm going to, I think it's just inappropriate, folks. I mean, if you would like, I will leave it up to the committee. If you would like to hear the concept of and then wait for it, or just wait for it to come. I don't want to cause additional confusion. Representative Cahill, you recognize it.
Mr. Chairman, I have a previous commitment. A dear friend has passed away, and I do want to go to the memorial service. And the late start is a problem, and I really hope to vote on both of these bills. I really can't wait for something else to happen in the interim.
Thank you, Representative Cahill. That being said, in order to try to move this along, I am going to let, I have a question here and then I will finish. Representative Turcotte.
I'd like to make a motion to retain SB 123 as amended.
That is a higher motion, I believe. There has been a motion on the floor to retain Senate Bill 123.
Is there anybody's second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Representative Seaworth. You may speak to your motion.
Point of order. Point of order.
Yes.
I understand that we should dispose of the motion on the floor before we take up another motion. We now have two motions on the floor.
That is. Got to pull out my parliamentary encyclopedia out of the back of my head, but more often than not, on the floor of the House, we have a motion on the floor. When a higher motion takes precedent, someone can tell me I'm wrong, and I'm not going to be offended. When a higher motion comes forth, my understanding is it squashes the amendment or the motion on the floor. Am I incorrect?
I believe the higher motion on the floor of the House is the tabling motion. We don't have a tabling motion in committee.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Sullivan. I need to have clarification on this before, but yes, Representative Turcotte.
I don't believe we have a motion on the floor.
We have a motion ought to pass with amendment, and then it was open to further
amendment.
Further amendment. That is the motion on the floor.
Okay. Do you want me to call the clerk?
Yes, please. Where Representative Addison is going to call the clerk to make sure we're doing everything correct. Representative Cahill, your motions.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we have an amendment that really improves the bill, a bill that we all seem to agree is a good bill. And I would really hope that we could just vote ought to pass on the amendment and move on to the next bill.
I would like to do that, Representative Kale. I have an appropriate amendment that was presented to me a day ago. And I believe it was emailed to everyone, so everyone has seen it. There was a technical,
Because we can't
um,
wait for the amendment to come in.
there was a wording
The question.
part that was incorrect by legislative services. And that part said it replaced the entire bill. Well, that's not what the goal was. The goal was to add an additional amendment. So trying for the last hour to get this done. And I'd like to have that voted either up or down. If it can't be here in the next 10 minutes, then I'm going to have to continue with I won't be able to accept this motion or an additional amendment. And then the other things are open. So Representative Adagen has a clarification for us.
So just to clarify, Mr. Clerk, the motion to retain is not in order because the motion is not a higher motion and OTPA has to be dealt with first. Is that correct? Yes. Okay. So if the OTPA is withdrawn, then another one can be made. Okay, so we can't retain it after the OTPA motion, but if we withdraw the OTPA motion, then we can make a motion for retainment. Okay.
Point of order.
Okay. Oh. All right, thank you. Bye. So we can, the clerk said OTPA has to be dealt with in one form or another for a retaining motion. We can either repeal OTPA and then do retain. We can defeat an OTPA motion and then do retain. But we can't.
Thank you very much, Representative Paul.
My question to the point of order is, it's my understanding what we just, it's my understanding what we just did was we did pass Representative Seaworth's amendment, OTP with amendment. We already passed that.
Yes.
We hadn't gotten to my amendment. So I don't know that mine is even a question at the moment.
The bill was open for further amendment. I recognize the important amendment. It was my understanding that the amendment was ready to go. And that's why I was recognizing it. Yes.
May I withdraw my amendment?
No. You may, but I would rather get a 5-minute, if it's not here.
Okay.
I have to move on.
Okay, thank you.
So I would ask that you call Christina, go to the elevator, see what you can get done to get this thing in everyone's hands in the next 5 minutes before we have to move on. Will do. No.
Just for clarity, passed his amendment, which amends, right, yeah. Right. Which amends the bill, but we never made a motion of ought to pass as amended. So we're still sitting in between nothing and nothing.
Correct. We passed the amendment.
So at that point, I would think, according to what the clerk reportedly has said, we are at a point that any amendment could be made, or the actual motion could be brought, as Mr. Turcotte was trying to. I think any one of those could be brought forward.
3 things can be done. Number 1, it was open to other amendments. If we have an amendment to review and pass, we can discuss it and either approve it or not. we can take the existing bill as amended, it would, Representative Seaworth's amendment, and we can vote on that and be done. We can withdraw the ought to pass amendment, vote on that to withdraw it, and then retain the bill. I would like to do one of the first. I'd like to amend it. If we can't get the amendment in the next 5 minutes or so, 10 minutes, then we're going to request to pass it with, well, I'll take whatever motion comes up. If it doesn't come in the next 10 minutes, it can be motion made to pass as is, or withdraw and retain. Those are the things in front of us, from my understanding this one.
To your question,
Representative
thank you.
Representative Seaworth, you recognize.
And I'm sorry for interrupting. I was thinking we already recessed, but I apologize.
You talk, I'm going to find out where this.
Okay. So, and I'm not 100% sure I've got this all right, because committees are different than the House floor. But in order to get a bill in discussion, I made the motion ought to pass and then offered an amendment to that bill. So the motion on the floor, as we discussed with the clerk, was the OTPA that I made at the very beginning to bring the bill into discussion. And that's why the clerk said that in order to do anything different, I have to withdraw that motion. Or we have to vote on it because I already made that motion.
It's ready. It says that it's ready. I'm trying to get it.
Yeah, boy.
Pick the hell of the day to be clerk. Pick the hell of the day to be clerk. I didn't pick it. Voluntold. I told Mr. that I was gonna have to talk to Representative Smith. Charlestown, just immediately. How did I get promoted? Because he promised me I'd never be in any of this stuff. It's like I used to get letters when I was in the service that was like, oh, thanks for volunteering for this 3-week off. Like, I did not volunteer for an extra week. Thanks.
My brother was in the reserve after he got out of the army, and he got one of those letters that was saying, oh, we're going to be looking for volunteers for that. And he was out of the reserve the next day.
Chair of the board for the Union Selection. I'm busy enough there. When I'm not busy, I like I'm not really up to speed on all of this stuff.
Actually, it could have been worse because public hearings, the clerk has more to do. Executive sessions, it's just recording the votes, which isn't too bad. When it's a long public hearing, the clerk has some work.
Function fairly well as selectmen. They got a secretary. Who's taking the notes and all that stuff, and I am terrible. I'll admit it. You don't want me doing notes.
I don't know if anybody could hear it on the Zoom call. The chairman briefly came in and out. He said that the amendment is done and he's just trying to get it to us. And then he went back out to work on that.
Thanks for the update.
Sit in the section.
Yes.
That's exactly what I just said.
I would ask that everyone please check your emails for something from Christina. We had it, she sent me over.
A whole lot of audit stuff, but no amendments.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, we all got, I do have. It
You've
is,
done it?
1758.
Oh, there it is.
My concern is Representative Love and Ms. Fisha may not have it. Christina, I know you're listening. You can make sure that Representative Fisha and Love were normally not on the labor committee also received the email. Representative Cahill, I will do everything I can to get this going. You're looking at lines 16 through 21. Should everyone?
Oh, nothing. It didn't look terribly different, and then I now understand where it's different. Yeah. I thought it was a repeat of the initial amendment. But it's got your name on it, right?
Oh, yeah.
Representative Infantine, how many copies do you need? I'm printing 10 right now.
That'll be sufficient. Everyone's reading them online.
Okay. I can also put it on the screen if that's helpful to anyone.
That'd be helpful.
Okay, so everybody, raise your hand. Oh, okay. It is. If you're putting this up here, Christina, for the public, please amendment, I guess under my name. 758H. 21. I think I see a hand. I didn't see who that was.
Mr. Chairman, before we discuss it, will it be introduced and seconded? Just ask.
Okay, I'm trying to move forward here. If everyone's seen this, if you think, if someone, I'm trying to see the screen is far away from me. Did someone have their hand raised?
I
Yes,
see
sir.
no hands raised.
Thank you.
Michael
Yes,
Cahill.
Representative Cahill, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do see the bill and the amendment, and the concept hasn't changed, although maybe an error was corrected. I don't know what's involved with final FDA approval, but I believe that the employers and other entities would use what's available while, in an emergency. And what's available, maybe have provisional FDA approval, much like the vaccine. So I would have to vote against this amendment. I don't think it's necessary or conducive.
First of all, let's back up. You gotta, why is this in my name? How do I recognize myself for an amendment I don't?
Well, I think
Any member. of the
Representative
committee
Huff can make the motion even though it's your.
Thank you. Representative Huff, you're recognized to, the bill is open for further amendment, you're recognized for further amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for committee for your indulgence. I would like to propose amendment 1758H.
Is that second?
Second.
Second, Representative Durgat, you're recognized to speak to your motion.
Thank you. One of the things that I was very, very concerned about in this atmosphere of COVID is it being used to force folks to take an unproven, possibly dangerous injection as a condition of work. So what I wanted to have happen here is just make it so that, and it's COVID-19 specific. So to have that not be a condition of employment until it has got final FDA approval. And the reason being is things like this take 5, 10, as many years because you need to see the side effects, you need to see what's going on for all of these things to come out. Once that has come out, this would be moot. So this is just, it's a protection for people who do not want to take an unproven drug. And then I just added in the second paragraph that paragraph 1 shall not apply to healthcare providers, because I know that in many, many cases, they have to do those things regardless. So that's my amendment. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than willing to entertain.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. I don't think the amendment is germane to the bill.
Bill. Show me why you think that considering the original bill. That's COVID written in it.
Because this, Mr. Chairman, was a bill to deal with the payment for tests. And now we're introducing language similar to some of the language that's being introduced or being considered as an amendment for HB 155 for relative to vaccines. The COVID tests and COVID vaccines are two completely different things. If this wanted to be put somewhere else, and maybe it's got some legitimacy, but I firmly believe that it's not germane.
Title of the bill is relative to employment pay for required COVID testing.
Correct.
Bill that COVID-19 is there.
Payment for COVID-19 testing. Now it's a completely different area. I'm happy to disagree, but I just want to.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
it's my understanding that the chairman of the committee has ruled this amendment germane.
Well, I was thinking that in the US to be recognized. So I'm going to make sure that I have my thought process as to why I believe it's germane.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
While this does say required COVID testing, actually, yeah, required testing, payment of testing. I do believe because it's dealing with this issue in there. If this were just, if the original bill was for any type of just generic testing, I would say. As well, I think we're right there.
Right.
All right. Could you please, Christina, take down the screen share so I can see everybody here? Okay, the motion on the floor has been made and has been seconded. Discussion by Representative Huff. is now open for discussion. Any discussion here at the LOB?
I would defer to somebody online first.
Any other discussion in the LOB at this point? Discussion online. Representative Sullivan, recognized.
I have to agree with Representative Cahill. Actually, I'd also agree with Representative Adjutant about the whether or not this is germane. Furthermore, I think I can support this bill as originally amended earlier in this hearing. I cannot support it with this further amendment on it for public safety purposes.
Representative Sullivan, any additional hands online? Representative Prout.
Thank you. I definitely think that this amendment definitely adds value and does make things better. I definitely think that we should not be allowing employers outside the specialized circumstance of healthcare providers to require a vaccination that has not gone through the full battery of tests and been evaluated for all the edge cases and contrary indicators that will be found in the final approval process. And so I support this amendment.
Thank you, Representative Speaker, followed by Representative Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, I cannot support this amendment when folks are denied, you know, employment by their employers for far less than this. I mean, I understand employers have to make this decision, and that is up to them. And so I can't support this amendment in good faith.
Thank you, Representative Adams.
Why do healthcare workers have to be required to take the vaccine as a condition of employment if it's so darn dangerous? When, you know, that last line made me think of why we're creating a situation of extenuating circumstances where some folks based on a condition of employment be required to get the vaccine, but not everybody else has to. Why is the healthcare field special there? Just a question, if anybody.
Comment.
And furthermore, could I get clarification from the sponsor of the amendment, the difference in his opinion between final approval and final authorization from the FDA?
Yes. All drugs have to go through a process. This particular one was fast-tracked without any of the clinical backup studies to make sure that there are no horrible side effects. I just want it to take its natural course. That's all.
It's more just a comment. I'm frustrated by this amendment because part of the reason why we have hesitation with encouraging folks, you know, I'm not a mandatory vaccination person either, but part of the frustration is that, you know, we have had 3 by my count, including this, pieces of legislation aimed at raising questions over the safety and the consistency of a COVID vaccine that has not had any major health issues in anybody that it's been applied to. Yeah, there was the 7 people that got blood clots with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Birth control gives people more blood clots than that vaccine did. So I'm not going to vote for the amendment. I'm angry because we are trying so hard to get out of this pandemic, and by raising questions like this in these hushed tones where we just want to be concerned, it's raising doubts in people's minds that unfortunately don't need to be there. So that's just my commentary on that.
Thank you. Any other comments here in the LOB? Additional comments online? Representative Cahill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure whether or not my colleague from Laconia has read the package insert on any medications or seen commercials. There's always a disclaimer. All medicines have side effects, And, if you're allergic to this ingredient or that ingredient, talk to your physician. The vaccines are very, very safe. Speaking from personal experience, I've had 2 doses with no issues at all. And I can't support this amendment. I'm sorry we spent so much of our time on it.
Thank you. So no other comment, Representative Love.
Just for the record, the safety of these vaccines is definitely in question. My roommate took a trip to Bethune last week. Was from Bethune and ran into an old friend of his. The guy's 30-year-old daughter, okay, a school teacher, athletics coach, she's an athlete herself, is dead from the vaccine. The media isn't telling us. It's happening all over the country. The media is failing to do its duty, but that doesn't mean we should be forcing folks to take a vaccine that they're not sure of. I mean, my fear of the vaccine is just as legit as anybody else's fear of catching COVID. Okay? We're a country of individual rights. That doesn't mean that we have no rule telling everybody they have to have a vaccine. I'm fully supporting this.
Thank you. The chairman is going to give his opinion. I have taken the vaccine. As you know, I was always wearing these things in this room, even though everyone said it was safe not to. I have taken unbelievable protocols and precautions. I've been around 7 people over the last year that were positive, including being with the Speaker of the House 4 days before he passed. And I did not contract, at the best of my knowledge, and I'm happy to do that because I used, sometimes you saw me, people laugh at me that sometimes I wore 2 masks at some of these events. I have taken the vaccine. I have 2 daughters, 19 and 21 years of age. One of them has a friend in the military. I told all the ladies in the military, if you're planning on having children in the next 5 years, don't take the vaccine. This came from the United States military within their ranks. People online, doctors say, oh, it's great. Don't worry. It's not going to deal with menstrual cycles or anything or births. Other people say, no, don't take it. We have a year to wait. We're getting tremendous amount of data. Millions and millions of people, 100 million people have taken this vaccine, at least completely. But my daughters have to take a vaccine if they want to go back to college. They're questioning whether they want to do that. It's their bodies. It's their thing. We always talk about this. It's a woman's body. Don't tell a woman what to do. Don't inhibit people from getting jobs. Minorities, some minorities are the ones not getting it. They don't either have access to it or they don't think they have access to it. So this surprises me that the role seemed to be turned here, where the Republicans want to make it so if someone chooses not to have a vaccine, it's not impeding their ability to get a job, which we're always accused of putting things in place to people not be able to get jobs. 20% of the people won't get it. There's been 10,000 people in this country that have gotten COVID after receiving the vaccine. I don't think any of them have died, or maybe very few. So they're working. And I would like people to get vaccines. I'm not going to tell my daughters what to do. I, as an employer, we have 80 employees all across the country. The 10 or 15 here in New Hampshire, I have a few of them that are not going to take it. They will not take the vaccine. I'm not going to make their job predicated on them taking the vaccine. I don't think that's right as an employer. So that is why I will be supporting this. I didn't expect it to come up. I didn't know until a day or so ago. But the more I think about it, I think this helps people that either don't want to take it still retain a job. I don't want people coming to this committee next year or on saying, our unemployment rate's higher because these people won't take the vaccine for their health reasons, yet or religious exemptions or whatever, so they can't get a job. Those are my comments. I have one last one from Representative Love.
One last comment.
And then Representative
In our legislature, we have a member that's a retired project manager, Pfizer. His job was vaccine development. And, I had a conversation with him and he said this mRNA might be the best thing since sliced bread. We don't know enough about it. It could be disastrous for them. He's not getting it. I've got another friend that's in pharmaceutical development also, and his family is not getting it. There isn't enough information. And, like JD said, it could be disastrous. We have a right to err on the side of caution. The American people, you know, we don't need any legislation that's going to tell us we can't work, we can't go to market basket, we can't go here, we can't go there. That's not freedom. Thanks.
Representative Nunez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will support this amendment. I think when we talk about these things, we're talking about individual liberty. And individual liberty belongs to the person, not to an organization, not to a company, not to the government. It belongs to the person. And that person has the right to make a decision on whether or not they would like any type of medical intervention on their body. So I will be supporting this amendment. I know that I have had stories that have been told to me by people that I know who have taken this vaccine that had some adverse effects from it. And I will say that a male representative, who I will not say his name for privacy purposes, was at my home last weekend after receiving the Johnson & Johnson shot, and I had to make up a bed for him to lay down in for several hours because it basically just knocked him out. So that I'll tell you that story. I'm not telling you who the person is. I will be supporting this amendment because I believe that it has to do with individual liberty. Thank you.
Any additional comments online? I see any hands? Any in the LOB? Representative Addison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for clarification, the vaccine having side effects afterwards is not an indication that it's secretly killing you. I registered my frustration with this earlier. I think it's just incredible that we've managed to nestle ourselves in the incredibly thin crevice of the center of the Venn diagram between people who in about 20 minutes or so are going to say that we can't mandate employers pay anymore because that's the decision of that business owner, but also that business owner does not have the freedom or does not have the purview over their business to say, no, I don't want, a risk of COVID coming back because this pandemic has been so terrible, has killed so many people, has done so much untold damage to this economy that we do not want to deal with this again. So I'm absolutely a no on this amendment.
Thank you. Seeing no other additional comments, there's a motion on the floor. Ought to pass with amendment. Please call the roll.
Representative Seaworth.
Seaworth votes yes.
Representative Avalante.
Yes.
Representative Callum votes yes. Representative Mackey.
Mackey votes yes.
Representative Nunez.
Representative Nunez votes yes.
Representative Turcott.
Representative Turcott votes yes.
Representative Love.
Representative Love votes yes.
Representative Prout.
Prout votes yes.
Representative Boyd.
Boyd votes yes.
Representative Huff.
Huff votes yes.
Representative Sullivan.
Sullivan votes no.
Representative Susie.
Representative Susie votes no.
Representative Baroudi.
Representative Rudy votes no.
Representative Cahill.
Cahill votes no.
Representative Espisa.
Espitia votes no.
Representative Schmidt.
Schmidt votes no.
Representative Toomey.
Toomey votes no.
Representative Bouchard.
Representative Bouchard votes no.
Representative Adjutant,
Ashton votes no.
Representative Infantine,
Infantine votes yes.
nine yes, sorry. 9 noes and 11 yes.
The amendment passes. The bill is open for further amendment. Are there any additional amendments? Seeing none, the motion on the floor is ought to pass. As amended by
1758.
passes amended by amendment 1638H, Seaworth, and 1578 by Infantine.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman. The way
Oh, okay. I
SIF
see.
1758 was drafted, it completely replaces 1638, so only 1758
Thank
is
you for the
is
clarification.
relevant.
The motion on the floor is ought to pass as amended. Amendment number 2021-1758. It's open for discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sitting over here, I have the ability to look at the sponsors list for SB 123. It's pretty evenly split. There are 5 Democrats and 3 Republicans. In a time of excised political polarization, conspiracy politics, I think it's so unfortunate that this legislation is now wildly different than as was originally proposed in this bipartisan way to do something good for folks who otherwise would have their employers shift costs onto them. It's going to be a fun committee of conference because it's incredibly different. So I guess we'll see how that pans out.
Any other comments on in the LOB? Any comments online? Representative Specia, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would just like to echo the comments of my colleague from Bridgewater, but just it's really sad. I we just poison pilled a good bill, which isn't the first time we've done this in the House. It's not the first time we've done it. It's happened in the Senate. In the legislature, we've had a pretty good bill that had bipartisan support, and just see it now just torn to flames because of what folks thought. So I'm really sad. I will be voting against this bill. Would have voted for it originally, but now the amendment has changed this bill completely. So I will be voting against it.
Thank you. Any other hands online? Seeing none, I will respond. Representative Adjunct, you're right. It's vastly different. The way it is, I'm glad we're going to have probably media conference. And I'm confident, however, that with the way the Department of Labor is adjudicating the request anyway, that they will be requiring in the meantime, at least in the interim, they will require, as they do now, the employer pay for these tests. Seeing no other hands or comments, clerk, please call the roll.
Representative Seaworth,
Seaworth votes yes.
Representative Avalani,
Avalani votes yes.
Representative Callum votes yes. Representative Mackey,
Mackey votes yes.
Representative Herschel, Nunes.
Representative Nunes votes yes.
Representative Love.
Representative Love votes yes.
Representative Turcott.
Representative Turcott votes yes.
Representative Prout.
Prout votes yes.
Representative Boyd.
Boyd votes yes.
Representative Huff.
Huff votes yes.
Representative Sullivan.
Sullivan votes no.
Representative Susie.
Susie votes no.
Representative Barudi.
Rudy votes no.
Representative Cahill.
Cahill votes no.
Representative Especia.
Representative Speaker votes no.
Representative Smith.
Schmidt votes no.
Representative Toomey.
Representative Toomey votes no.
Representative Bouchard.
Representative Bouchard votes no.
Representative Adjutant.
Adjutant votes no.
Representative Infantine.
Representative Infantine votes yes.
Seven yes, 9 no.
Motion passes. I need the, whoever's going to write the blurb in favor and against. I need those by close of business today, if not sooner.
I can do a favor.
The next bill in front of us is Senate Bill 137. Representative Seaworth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion to pass, and I have an amendment.
Second the motion.
Please move your amendment first.
And I would like to move amendment 1596H.
Second.
Seconded by Representative Turcott. You're recognized to speak on your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought my last amendment was going to be the easy part. Hope that isn't a foretelling of what's going to happen here. This amendment, once again, when we listened to this bill in the public hearing, there were a number of concerns. Some of them I raised, some of them I heard around the table, some of them I heard from across the table. I think both sides were concerned about the way this bill was worded. And so with this amendment, I tried to simplify the language, not really change anything with the intent of the bill so much, but try to clean up the language, and some of the confusing things were in there. The first thing I did was the original bill did three things, more or less. It addressed this 45% number that's in the bill for this base rate for tipped wages. It added cigar bars as an employer who could use the tipped rate. And it also added employees who were licensed as charity casino dealers, essentially, to be able to use the tipped rate. And it was that last piece that I found convoluted the language. And after discussing with the bill's sponsors and the supporters, including the gentleman who was representing the casinos, I felt it cleaned up the bill quite a bit to remove that. I won't go into the details, but I'm happy to answer more questions about that. So those employees are removed from this bill, which greatly cleans up the remaining elements. I think it simplifies it. It makes it straightforward. I also kind of flipped around the way the wording was done. The original bill emphasized that the 327, which is what 45% of 725 is, and is the current law, it emphasized that. And as the Department of Labor brought up, that created a problem. If the federal rate actually went up higher than that, then it created this conflict where the state law was one thing, but the federal law, which really applies, is different. So the language flips that around to make it clear that the federal law is what applies, except that we won't go below the current rate. So I think those changes are straightforward. I think it simplifies the bill, and we can discuss the bill itself after we vote on the amendment.
Reverend Seaworth, anyone like to speak in favor or against the bill as amended here in the LOP? Anyone would like to speak on the bill as amended online? Any hands? Seeing none. Clerk, can we call the roll? It's on. Senate Bill 137.
Mr. Chairman, to clarify, we are voting on the amendment.
Representative Sullivan?
We are voting on the amendment, not OTPA, correct?
We're voting on the amendment.
Thank you.
Amendment number 15968.
Representative Seaworth.
Seaworth votes yes.
Representative Avalani.
Avalani votes yes.
Representative Ellen votes yes. Representative Mackey.
Mackey votes yes.
Representative Nunes.
Representative Nunes votes yes.
Representative Love.
Representative Love votes yes.
Representative Turcott.
Turcott votes yes.
Representative Prout.
Prout votes yes.
Representative Boyd.
Boyd votes yes.
Representative Huff.
Huff votes yes.
Representative Sullivan.
Sullivan votes yes.
Representative Susi.
Susi votes no.
Representative Arudi.
Representative Barudi votes yes.
Representative Cahill.
Cahill votes yes.
Representative Espisha.
SPT votes yes.
Representative Schmidt.
Schmidt votes no.
Representative Toomey.
Representative Toomey votes yes.
Representative Bouchard.
Representative Bouchard votes no.
Representative Adjutant.
Adjutant votes no.
Representative Infantine.
Infantine votes yes.
Yes, 4 no.
The amendment passes and the bill is open for further amendment. Representative Adjutant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to introduce amendment 1366H to SB 137.
Just one. Representative has moved amendment 1366H. You need a second of the motion?
I'll second.
Second by Representative Bouchard. Representative Attitude, you're recognized to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My motion, my amendment is pretty simple. The original sponsor of the bill thought that 725 was good enough for some folks. I think it's good enough for everybody. 327 is a ridiculous joke, and I'll speak further to that after hopefully this amendment is passed. But we're talking about what's good for some, what's good for all. Let's put everybody on a level playing field in their opinion and pass this amendment.
Very well. The floor is open for speaking in favor or against the amendment. Are there any comments or here in the LOB? Representative Seaworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was happy to see that we got some bipartisan support for my amendment, but I have no illusions that that means that there's support for the bill. I know we have some, there's a lot of conflict over the subject of minimum wage and particularly the subject of tip minimum wage. There's a lot of opinions. I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that I think where this agreement is, and evidenced by the amendment from my fellow representative, is that the 45% number doesn't really make sense. I think, Mr. Chairman, you said we're the only state in the nation that actually tries to do this as a percentage. Why 45%? That's really hard to justify. I wasn't here when the 45% number was originally put into law. I was here when we changed the minimum wage to tie it directly to the federal rate rather than kind of mirroring it with our own language. And I know we kept the 45% at that time. And I can speculate as to why that might have happened. At that time, this was, I think, 10 years ago, if you had said, okay, the federal rate is going to go up, what might it go up to? $8 might have been a good guess as to what to expect next at the federal level. And when you apply the 45% to $8, that's a 30-cent increase in the tip rate. And, you know, is that the right number? Does it really matter when you're talking about 30 cents, 20 cents? Nowadays, $8, I would say, is next to impossible to see that as a proposal for what the minimum wage should be. And certainly during the hearing, we talked about what's currently on being proposed at the federal level, but really it could be anything. And I think we need to anticipate that. It could be 9, 10, 12, 15. We had a bill that was $23.50, which the 45% would drive it up then to 11 something would be our tip minimum wage, which is a lot more than any of our neighboring states. And it could be devastating for the hospitality industry. So the argument then is, what is the right number? And I don't like the characterization that we're telling everybody to pay $327. That is what it is now. And the way this is written is it sets a floor to that if the feds change their rate and it's still below $327, that we don't go down to their rate, that we only go up to their new rate. I think that's a conservative way to deal with the simple fact that we don't know what's going to happen with federal law, and trying to pass something that anticipates that anticipates what the other states in New England might do as a reaction, I think is difficult. And so that's why I propose, and I will continue to support this conservative approach that does the same thing with the tip rate, follows the federal rate, that we do with the minimum rate overall. I don't know that 725 is the perfect, and that's one number. we could debate where it should be. The other thing, though, that I want to bring up is we're not setting that as a rate for people to be paid. Right now, tipped employees, some do get $7.25. Some get something between $7.25 and $3.27. Some probably do get $3.27, but we're not driving everybody to one rate. We're setting an absolute floor in line with what federal law does. I happen to present my version of the amendment to the representative for the cigar bars, and he said that they, for one, have no intention of lowering the rate that they pay their bartenders just because we authorize it. And I think that's the way we have to look at this. This is anything with minimum wage is a floor. It's not a wage that we're requiring employers to pay. Stop with that because it is my
Thank
fellow
you.
representatives.
The hands in which I saw them raise were Adigent and then Turcott, followed by Love, and then we'll go online.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe the bipartisan agreement in the vote a few minutes ago was more intended to clean up the language that we all agreed during the public hearing was a little duplicitous. The reason why I put 725 in there instead of 45%, in a perfect world, I would prefer the 45% number to be there because I think that makes it easier as a percentage for the tip to minimum wage to keep track with whatever the federal is. But 725 was in the bill in a different point regarding the charitable gaming folks. So versus proposing an amendment that was just literally the text in the RSA, I provided a germane amendment and tried to loop everybody up to the language that was already in the proposed legislation.
We'll dig there.
Yep, a little big.
Make sure I caught it.
So that's the situation on that. So I appreciate my colleagues' recognition of a little bipartisanship, but I think a lot of that was more inclined at cleaning up the two paragraphs that were the exact same as each other.
You're right. Representative Turcott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just first a question for the maker. In lines 10 through 13, much like the original bill that came out of the Senate, appears we have paragraph in 10 through 13 that for all intents and purposes is exactly the same as 13 through 16. When I asked Senator Bradley about that, his comment was, you guys can fix that. So seeing this in your amendment, is there a difference? Is there the intent to be a difference, or is it a oversight?
Nope. I think that unfortunately was a different drafting error. I don't know why that wasn't there when I went through it. I purposely deleted that part out. Yeah, it's the same drafting error as the initial one.
Thank you. And continue on. I'll be against this amendment. I think one of the things we lose track of or lose sight of here, we've got a state minimum tipped wage, a federal minimum tipped wage. Nobody ever makes below the minimum wage set at the federal level. Because if the tip wage, if they don't make the minimum of $7.25 an hour, the difference is always made up. That is very, very rare to begin with. So nobody's ever going to, in a tipped wage, is ever going to make less than $7.25 an hour. And it's been in testimony after testimony here. We know that most tipped employees get somewhere north of 20, some as high as 30, and some even more when you look at some of the higher end restaurants. So I'll be voting against this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. I need to take a few online just a moment, if you wouldn't mind, Representative Love. Do I have any questions? Not questions, comments online.
Lino, this one.
Representative Avalani, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just for clarification, how would a minimum wage paid employee as of today, if this was to pass and become law, how would they be required to claim beyond wage?
Representative, you broke up significantly. Could you please ask your question again?
My apologies, Mr. Chairman. If this amendment passes and the bill becomes law as of this year, how would the IRS rules and regulations for tipped employees work if the tipped employee now makes minimum wage? How would they be required to claim any tips above and beyond minimum wage?
I can only venture a guess. I'm not an IRS agent, nor do I understand all the rules and laws, but there are people currently paying, there are currently individuals that are making more than $327 an hour for tipped employees, as tipped employees, just for their base rate from their employer, and then their tips on top of that. So I'm sure it's still legal regardless. But I can't answer your question as a qualified tax preparer or IRS representative. Have any other? You have any other your comments on the amendment? Hearing none, Representative Love, and then I'm looking for additional hands online. Representative Love, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be voting against this amendment. I believe in letting the market dictate the cost of labor or the cost of products or anything. It kind of reminds me, we'll start off with, for those of us that are old enough to remember the recessions of the 70s and stuff like that. This would have devastated businesses. And God only knows if we're going back that way. Back in the 70s, I was driving a beer truck, and it was a union job. We were out on strike, and I went over to my grandfather's house. I'm a young kid jumping up and down. We're going to get this and we're going to get that. And we finger at me. Says, if the boss ain't making money, nobody's making money. You gotta make sure the bosses can still make money. There's a delicate balance that we can't ignore. If you're paying $25 for a hamburger because the dishwasher's making $7.25 or more because they're not tipped, or if the waitresses are getting $7.25 plus their tips, that burden falls on the business owner. And when are we overstepping that balance? I think this is a bad deal for business owners. Can't do this to businesses.
Thank you. Just a second. I don't see any additional questions online. I'm going to recognize Representative Adage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just real quick, I emailed or I texted this to the members online that I had phone numbers for, and I printed off a copy for all of my friends on the Labor Committee today. Following Representative Love's commentary, I just want to, before we discuss it further in the final bill, turn everybody's attention to the Newsweek article that I attached to your copy of the amendment that's titled Denny's Shareholders Revolt After Top Executive Concedes $15 minimum wage Won't Hurt Businesses. The article is about how investors in the company Denny's are trying to leave the National Restaurant Association because the National Restaurant Association is talking out of both sides of their mouth, telling the investors that actually a $15 an hour minimum wage and one wage for everybody is not gonna, have cats and dogs living together and fire breathing down from the sky. And then lobbying politicians that actually, in fact, it's going to be the end of days. So before we discuss that further, I just wanted to take that opportunity to bring that up so that we're all having the same discussion in a couple of minutes.
Thank you. Representative Huff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to say, from the testimony that we got on this bill, Senator and the bill sponsor said in his testimony that a raise in the required minimum wage for tipped employees could manifest in a doubling of that wage. This is almost what my colleague from Grafton County is alluding to in his amendment. The senator also went on to say it would create duress and pressure on business establishments it would have the potential to put businesses out of business. It would reduce employee hours and create job loss. This is the author of the bill warning against a higher rate. And for that reason, I'm going to oppose this amendment.
I see no additional hands online. None in yellow B. I applaud you for submitting your amendment. I find it interesting, and I had this conversation with Representative Sullivan on the phone yesterday or the day before. This concept of getting rid of the 45% has been passed around this legislature for a number of years. Most recently presented by Senator Donna Susie, my senator. And actually, I was surprised that Republicans wanted to vote for this, and the Democrats really didn't want to vote for it, because this makes it easier, quite frankly, to increase the minimum wage. Because every time we have a minimum wage issue, the biggest barkers are the tipped employee owners because of the 45%. And it precludes the minimum wage from going up, because that's always the tip part is always the problem. That's always the 45%. Oh, we can't do that. They're already making more, blah, 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 blah. That's always the problem. When you separate these into two different things, it makes it easier to maybe increase one, or maybe the other, or both, whereas before it had to be both. So it actually makes it easier to pass minimum wage. Senator Susie's bill had the minimum wage increased to $12 with the tip wage to $4 in her bill that passed the Democrat-led House and Democrat-led Senate last year. And it included getting rid of this 45%. They were going to be their own separate things. So now the same thing has been proposed, except for raising, which I think we all can agree are raised by market anyway. And we're already pretty much there at 4 and 12. So it's interesting to keep the eye on the ball of the concept here. We're having discussions about 327, 725 for the tip, 725, whatever. The concept here that needs is the 45%. Getting rid of that allows this legislature a lot easier time to increase the minimum wage should they see fit. So I applaud what you've done, Representative Adams. I can't go along with you, and not just because you made it big, because that's okay. I'm okay with that. You and I can do that. But I'll talk more about it in the final bill. But I hope my colleagues keep the eye on this. Minimum wage is a lot higher than the 725. Even the tip wage, people are paying more. And I'll give examples of that when we have our final discussion. Real life stories here in the state of New Hampshire. But it's the 45%. So when you vote on this finally, if you really want to increase the minimum wage in the state of New Hampshire, that 725, you have a better chance of doing it with that 45% removed. I see no other questions, hands raised anywhere. Mr. Clerk, would you please call the roll on the amendments 1, 3, 6, 8 by Representative.
Representative Seaworth,
Seaworth votes no.
Representative Avalani,
You're on mute, Representative.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. Avalani votes no.
Representative Callum votes no. Representative Mackey,
Mackey votes no.
Representative Nunes,
Representative Nunes votes no.
Representative Warden. Oh. Representative Love.
Representative Love votes no.
Turcott votes no.
Representative Cloud,
Trout votes no.
Representative Boyd,
White votes no.
Representative Huff,
Huff votes no.
Representative Sullivan,
Sullivan votes yes.
Representative Susie,
Susie votes yes.
Representative Baroody,
Representative Barudi votes yes.
Representative Cahill. It's not here anymore. Oh, it's not there. Representative Especia,
Jay votes yes.
Representative Schmidt,
Schmidt votes yes.
Representative Toomey,
Representative Toomey votes yes.
Representative Bouchard,
Representative Bouchard votes yes.
Representative Adjutant,
Ashton votes yes.
Representative Infantine, yes, 11 no.
Fails. The bill is open for additional amendments or any amendments on the floor. Seeing none, the motion on the floor is ought to pass. Amendment 1596H is open for comments.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Excuse me for interrupting. I did not hear the count on the amendment count from you guys. Could you please repeat that?
8 yes, 11 no.
I think that's the other way around.
No, that's correct.
Representative Nunez, it was
Is that right?
the amendment was presented by Representative Adjutant.
Yeah, okay, I was backwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the motion on the floor is ought Senate Bill 137 is ought to pass with amendment number 1596H is open for comments. Representative Seaver.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to speak to my motion briefly here. And first of all, I apologize to any colleagues that I was putting words in their mouth or thoughts in their head. I certainly wasn't trying to do that. I was trying to be a little funny and maybe failed. But what's important to me here is that, again, as I said before, I know we have a very contentious debate going on in this House, going on in this country about what the minimum wage should be. And that seeps into the argument over this bill, but it is my belief that's not what this bill is about. To me, the bill is about the 45%, whether that's appropriate, and I don't think it is. And I think it's important that we remove the 45% number before it comes and does something terrible to our businesses. And it really, you know, I think we all got an email from a restaurant owner that talked about what the catastrophic effects could be if a huge increase to this tipped rate comes through. And the problem is we don't know what could happen. We've got this percentage that automatically calculates the tip rate without any deliberation on the part of this legislature. And I think that's the problem that needs to be fixed. As I said before, and I won't dwell on it, I think focusing on the 327 is not the way to read this bill. What this bill does is sets our state minimum rate to match the federal minimum rate, just as it is with the minimum wage itself. Again, I understand that this is a contentious issue. We could debate whether that's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. In my opinion, that's not the focus of the bill. The focus of the bill is the 45% number. I don't know if the chairman was trying to get me to waver in my support. He may have a point that taking the 45% away removes one of the big roadblocks to getting a state minimum wage law passed. That could be that's a good point, because the 45% has this unintended consequence of maybe a reasonable change to the minimum wage could be a very critical change to this subset of businesses that's relying on this formula that the feds have for crediting tips against the minimum wage and calculating what needs to be in the paycheck. But he did not convince me. I am still advocating for my bill to pass as amendment. I don't know if I can get any votes to swing my way, but I'll ask. And I hope we don't get into too much of a debate about setting the minimum wage, because once again, I don't think that's the purpose of this bill. Finally, one thing I pointed out in the email, and I'll emphasize it again, just in case it's missed, is this not on the amendment page, but in the original bill, there's a clause that says this does not take effect until the federal government changes the minimum wage. And that's, I think we need to keep that in mind, that passing this does absolutely nothing in the near term. Things remain exactly as they are until it is triggered by action at the federal government. And I think we need to see what that action is before we decide, is our current law good enough, or do we need to make further changes? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Representative Attitude.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to agree with my colleague that the purpose of the main focus of this bill is the elimination of the 45%. However, that's not the way the sponsor presented it to us. The way the sponsor presented it to us was this is an effort to freeze the tipped minimum wage at 327. So I would like to see it through that lens. However, I'm going to go with the way that Senator Bradley talked about it and brought it to us. Today, I'm asking the Labor Committee to vote against the OTPA motion because, put simply, the bill is quasi-constitutional and it is good for anybody involved. On the issue of constitutionality, the bill would be, by my count, the fourth piece of legislation advanced in this body that seeks to preemptively nullify federal law. The Supremacy Clause of the Constitution clearly states that so long as a federal law does not violate the Constitution, it takes effect over a conflicting state law. The sponsor of the bill even agreed to as much when he testified before the committee, when he said, quote, "If the feds raise the tipped minimum wage, this conversation is over." If the minimum wage were to increase, the tipped one would absolutely take precedent. And we know this because, as was explained to us in the hearing, the Raise the Wage Act does include an increase to the tipped minimum wage, already zeroing out this language. Leaving redundant language in the RSAs that strikes at the tenets of federalism, in my opinion, is counterproductive. Why would we pass a bill that the sponsor acknowledges has a slim chance of relevancy? On the issue of why the bill isn't good for anybody involved, I want to bring some data into this conversation. According to the National Restaurant Association statistics from 2017 and 2018, states where there is no sub-minimum wage are experiencing better or the same restaurant growth as states without them. In fact, as I alluded to, the restaurant chain Denny's is trying to leave the National Restaurant Association after their shareholders had to admit to their investors that the minimum wage increase has been good for business. And a quote from the article in Newsweek dated May 5th, quote, "On an earnings call in February, Denny's chief financial officer, Robert Veristek, told investors that the California law raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2023 has actually been good for the diner chain. Quote, as they've increased their minimum wage kind of in a tempered pace over the time frame, if you look at that time frame from us, California has outperformed the system. Over that time frame, they had 6 consecutive years of positive guest traffic, not just positive sales, but positive guest traffic as the minimum wage was going up. More people were participating at the restaurant than prior. When the sponsor came to the committee, he said, well, if you raise the minimum wage, it'll lead to more automation. And I have heard the lore of the McDonald's robots for as long as I've been alive. And now McDonald's is offering applicants iPhones in some places to work for them because they so desperately need people. The sponsor said, well, if you raise the minimum wage, those places won't be able to hire employees. No, they can't hire employees because some folks look at the possibility of people getting paid in such a way that they aren't the first generation of Americans in history worse off than their parents. And they say, how can we possibly pay these people less? The Restaurant Owners Association raised concerns that this is unnecessary because the average worker makes over $20 an hour with tips. To which I say, please explain to me how one can simultaneously believe that we have to end the unemployment benefits early for 15,000 people because that measly $300 a week benefit, quote, pays more than working does, but working also somehow pays $800 a week. Doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The fact of the matter is that these people do hard work. I know a lot of people think that being a server or a cook is easy, but it is not. Running around on your feet, dealing with impolite and sometimes downright cruel customers who take pride in the fact that they don't tip, and all the other stuff they're forced to put up with to maybe get a 5% tip is ludicrous. You can just raise the menu prices a little bit, which will not impact your customer base, as was alluded to in the article, because eating out is still a fun thing that people will do, even if the chicken salad goes from $9.99 to $10.99, and give your staff the security of a paycheck that they can reasonably plan on at the end of every week so that they may budget. And I promise you, they will be happier to work for you. Folks know that I love to weave historical themes into my remarks, so I'd like to close out this with this incredibly relevant quote by President Franklin Roosevelt. Do not let any calamity howling executive with an income of $1,000 a day, who has been turning his employees over to the government relief rolls in order to preserve his company's undistributed reserves, tell you that a wage of $11 a week is going to have a disastrous effect on all American industry. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I do enjoy the Representative Seaworth, and I'm going to ask a couple people online.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do have a question about your comment. You mentioned the potential constitutionality issue, which I'd like you to clarify. I understand your point relative to the original bill that came over. I understand it relative to some of the comments from the sponsor, but certainly my intention in making that amendment was to remove that constitutionality issue if it is indeed that, and fix it.
Well, I'm happy to answer. And actually, Representative Seaworth, I would refer you also back to something that you closed out your remarks with when you said we want to, why should we make any sort of decision before we see what the federal minimum wage ends up being? Like between this, the HR 1 bill that went before election law the other day, there was another one that went before criminal justice. There's another one that I'm forgetting off the top of my head. It just seems like there are so many preemption bills that really play with the concept of federalism and nullification. And again, not by your interpretation of removing the 45%. I understand what you're saying on that. And I would agree with Representative Infantine that that makes it a little easier. I'm referring to the way the bill was characterized when it came to us, which is if the minimum wage goes up, we are going to have our own special little thing that flies in the face of the supremacy clause and cross our fingers that it works because it will destroy the restaurant industry otherwise. That's that sort of nullification concept that I'm feeling in some of these bills.
I don't want to debate, but if you want to ask. clarifying question.
I am concerned that this is no longer a senator's bill, what he thought it did or what he wrote. If that language isn't here, that's not his bill anymore. And just to refer to my language as amended, it says that the base rate, which is what we call our tipped employee, will not be less than the minimum direct wage as set forth in federal minimum wage law. Minimum direct wage is what they call their version of that same number. So I wanted to very clearly say federal law preempts us and we're going to adopt that as state policy. If I'm contradicting someone else on some other language, respectfully, I ask that we consider the language that's before us and not what someone else thinks should be.
If I can respond to that, Mr. Chairman.
One last time.
Yes, and I agree. I understand. If we are making the language in so that it catches up to the federal minimum wage anyways, then why even have the bill? Because it's the same thing. If the tip to, I also want to clarify that, like, I wish I had the confidence that some members do that the minimum wage is going to go up. I've been incredibly disappointed with some of the ways that certain senators in DC have handled that bill. It just feels like so much to insert in the RSA for something that basically spells out that the minimum wage would just be whatever the federal minimum wage is anyways. It just feels like putting language in there that might not need to be there. So I appreciate the amendment. I understand the language, still disagree.
Any comments? I'm looking for hands, yellow ones or real ones online. I don't see it, but Representative Toomey? No?
No.
Oh, that might be the cursor.
There it is.
Yeah.
Sorry, Representative Toomey, we have like the white hand is the cursor up by your face, accidentally. Any comments here in the LOB? Speaker, the chairman has a couple of comments, but any comments here? All right. You know, I've worked as a laborer in the hot sun, all through high school and college, building stone walls, laying sod. I was a Burger King assistant manager. While I had a job as a trainee as an insurance company. So I've done some of these jobs. And never really been a tipped employee, but I know what it's like to work and want to see that minimum wage increase. I personally get this on camera, all you people. Give you a second, but you want to take this. I personally believe the minimum wage should be increased for both tipped and non-tipped because I'm sick and tired of hearing the argument. We're paying people in excess of that. Now, and I'm going to use my daughters again. One of my daughters came home. It's been working at Old Navy, $10 an hour, folding clothes and doing whatever. She went job seeking. Had 3 or 4 offers in the same day. She now makes in excess of $12 an hour as a hostess at a restaurant, and she can garner tips for the takeout. My other daughter has worked at a restaurant for the last 5 or 6 years through her high school and now in her college career. She makes $7.75 plus tips. There are other companies out there that have said, I don't care about the $327 an hour for tips. I'm going to pay you $4 or $5 an hour plus your tips. This is a minimum. It doesn't preclude someone from doing more. It allows employers to hire good people and get and pay them better. And I'm all for that. That's why I want to increase. I'd increase it to $4 for tips and $10 right off the bat, because that's what people are making right now. And it takes away this argument that people aren't making that. And I don't like the argument. The freeze that everyone talks about. It was a very poor choice of words by the speaker. What he meant by that is it freezes at 327 instead of bringing it down to the federal 219 or whatever it is. That was what I think everyone could probably agree was meant. It was not meant to say, doesn't matter if we increase it, the feds increase it or whatever, or if the feds increase it, let's say to $3. Let's say this thing gets passed down in DC, it's $10 an hour and maybe $3. They increase the tip wage. Ours would have to go back to 3. No, we're keeping it at 327. I wish you'd said 4. It would have made it easier. I would have liked to have seen that. Why the bill? Again, this is not a poison pill, but this helps. This bill passes, it helps increase the minimum wage because you no longer have the tipped wage lobby coming here and saying we can't afford it, we can't afford it. They're already making X amount of tips and they're doing this anyway. Which is surprised why Republican, it's just a dichotomy you talked about. What do you call the Venn diagram of something earlier? It makes it easier. These folks feel that in the tip industry that as prices go up, the percentage of the tip goes up. So you pay $10 for this, and you 20% tip, that's $2. You pay 15, it's $3 or whatever. It goes up. That they're getting that anyway with pure inflation and the increasing cost. So they're getting a higher tip anyway. This totally removes that argument for increasing the minimum wage. That's the focus. Would I like to increase the minimum wage? Say it again. Get your cameras ready. I'm one of the Republicans that wants to increase the minimum wage. Number one, I think it's a joke that we're paying people not $8, not $8.50, not $9, not even $10 an hour to do the most menial task imaginable. We're paying more than that, and we can't get employees, and they're hiring people for more and bonuses and cell phones. Amazon, McDonald's, what's yours? Denny's, Amazon have all decided to increase to a minimum $10, $12 an hour. They're all agreeing to this. Now, not every single job or every single employer is going to be that way, but a significant majority, and there are jobs to be had. So, hey, want to make it harder to increase the minimum wage, don't vote for this. But this is coming from I guess, not a conservative enough Republican on the issue. But getting rid of that 45% makes things any easier for folks to get even more fair, even more fair wage than I think that is on the books right now here.
If I may, at this late hour, I guess I'm kind of in the same boat with Representative Stein. And that is, I'm sick of hearing about minimum wages and stuff. I don't know anybody who's actually making less than the minimum wage as it is. And I have, if we can use witnesses, I have a grandson who is working for a pizza outlet in Newport. Newport, so everybody will understand, is it's the county seat of the second poorest county in the state. He is making $18 an hour, $15 an hour before tips. And the drivers that are running service to your home or wherever you want it are making similar money plus tips. So I will vote for this for the reasons that I hope everybody understands. We are making, or people are making far more than the minimum wage, and I would much rather let the market dictate what the wages are.
Thank you. So no other comments here in the LOB or online. The motion on the floor is Senate Bill 137 ought to pass with amendment number 1596H by Representative Seaworth. Mr. Clerk, please call roll.
Representative Seaworth,
Seaworth votes yes.
Representative Amalani,
Avalani votes yes.
Allen votes yes. Representative Mackey,
Mackey votes yes.
Representative Nunes,
Representative Nunes votes yes.
Representative Love,
Representative Love votes yes.
Representative Turcott,
Turcott votes yes.
Representative Prout,
Prout votes yes.
Representative Boyd,
Boyd votes yes.
Representative Huff,
Huff votes yes.
Representative Sullivan,
Sullivan votes no.
Representative Susie,
Susie votes no.
Representative Barudi, Representative Barudi,
Ben, you're up.
Rudy votes no.
Representative Cahill. Oh, he's up. Representative Especia,
Representative Espitia votes no.
Representative Schmidt,
Schmidt votes no.
Representative Toomey,
Representative Toomey votes no.
Representative Bouchard,
Representative Bouchard votes no.
Representative Adjutant votes no.
Did you get the Representative Love? Yeah, I apologize.
Representative Infantine,
Votes yes.
Seven yes, 8 no.
Motion passes. I'd like to have blurbs again today on both bills. Just let me know. Send them to me by email as you always have. Stay tuned for committee's conference as we get responses from the Senate, and I'll see you all at the House session. Any further business in front of this committee?
Chairman, this is Christina. As this is a calendar day, I was hoping we could try to get them in by 3 o'clock at the latest for the blurbs, if folks are able to do that.
Already sent mine to you.
First, you made me move it from yesterday till today. Now you wanted it first. We will do what we can, Christina, to take care of that, folks. If you can try to get those to me by 3 o'clock, I would appreciate it.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
if the minority knows what their recommended motion and who their author are going to be, I can put that in my form if they're still thinking about it. I understand.
Yes, if you could let us know who we speak on the floor.
Let you know when I know.
Thank you, Representative Sullivan. All right, thank you, everyone.